I do appreciate it. I paused that while I was managing things. My apologies. Here we are.
We are ready. Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TechLife Columbus. This is the Unconquered Bridging the Digital Divide series. My name is Tonjia Coverdale, and I am going to be your host today. So thank you so much for joining us for our first show. We've got a action-packed show for us today with some mega stars that I feel like starstruck with. I can't believe they're actually going to be here with us today. We're still waiting for two to come, but you all know who they are. We're going to have Doug McCollough, Ervan Rodgers, and Jermaine Henson joining us today to talk about the digital divide. So while everyone is still kind of gathering, I wanted to do a few housekeeping things and kind of tell you a little bit about why we're here and what it is we're hoping to accomplish. Firstly, we might be on Zoom, but this is not your workplace's Zoom meeting, okay? So we are going to be interactive. Get your chat windows open. Keep it all to the side. As we're talking and you're thinking about questions for us, please feel free to drop them in the chat. There will be opportunities. We're in the middle of our conversation. We'll all jump back and forth. So think talk show style. I mean, even though we're all sitting down, if we were in a studio audience, I'd be running around with the microphone saying, okay, what are you thinking about this? And so that's kind of where we're going with that. Secondly, if you know how to use some of the functions like the applause, I want to see applause. So we say, welcome, Doug. You know, I want to see all the yellow V's kind of jump up on the screen. So we're gonna be interactive, and I'm gonna have an applause machine though for next one. Okay. So remind me, Matt and Stephanie, remind me that we're gonna act, because I'm gonna go, you know, like it's gonna be like a whole real show. Like this is not Zoom. We're not gonna Zoom this Zoom. Okay. This is a show, just like we were in a studio audience. Okay. All right. So just remember, get your little 3 ellipses. You click on it, you should be able to see applause, and we want to use that while appropriate. Okay. All right. Yes. There we go. So just like studio audience, you know how they applaud when we introduce people and all that good stuff. All right. All right. So I cannot tell you how excited I was when Ben asked me to host a show. Firstly, I'm thinking, who is that crazy to have me like hosting something for an hour? But you know, I will do it. And he gave me the freedom to think about what topic I wanted to talk about. And without hesitation, I knew that this would be the opportunity to really highlight the digital divide. So I decided to call the show Unconquered, because you know the old saying, divide and conquer, right? I know we've heard that, divide and conquer. But two things, we are not conquered by this divide. There are people and processes and programs and just so many great initiatives that are happening that we'll learn more about in the next 3 episodes that are working to conquer this divide. So we remain unconquered. But also in the double entendre, I wanted us to be aware that we still haven't conquered the divide. So it kind of has like a dual purpose of why we call this show Unconquered. And so for the first, and I started thinking about this a little bit more, and I really want the guests to kind of share, but this is, and Jermaine's here, yay. When we think about the divide, a lot of times people think about it as a technology problem. So we'll say, oh, it's a digital divide. This means that if we give people computers, then they should be able to do whatever they need to do because they have technology. But what you'll learn today and what you'll learn next month in April and May over the 3-show series is that it's so much deeper than just throwing technology at the problem. It's so much deeper than that. There are so many determinants of the digital divide. So when thinking and preparing for the show, and in my background years ago, well, I'm still somewhat an academic. I did a lot of research on it. I kind of aggregated all of the determinants into three categories: economic determinants, infrastructural determinants, and career educational determinants. And so here to talk about those three are my three brothers in technology, my three friends, and my three special guests. And I'm just beaming with excitement and pride. And I wish we were literally all in the studio together. Doug McCollough, who is CIO of the city of Dublin, amongst other million things I'm going to let him tell you about. And Jermaine Henson is here, and he is a VP at Nationwide Technology. And Ervan is showing up. Ervan Rodgers is our third special guest, and he is the state of Ohio CIO. So let's give a round of applause for all of our special guests. This is where I should see all the light, all the hands. Yes, you're doing. Oh man, this crowd is great. I love it. Okay, so let's just say hi to my friends. I'm gonna call them up one by one because we don't want to have all of the sound crossing, but just to say hi, tell us a little bit about them. And I'm gonna start with Doug since he was first to the party. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Tonjia. Thank you for raising the energy level up a little bit for a 4 o'clock gathering, which is good. Awesome. What can I tell you? What should I tell you?
Tell them about yourself, Doug. I mean, I know you're amazing, and I want them to know how amazing you are. So tell us, who you are, what you're doing, just your interest in the divide.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I am the Chief Information Officer of the City of Dublin, but I also do a lot of other things. And I've been working on what I've been calling digital divide type things for a long time, advocating to help people participate in this amazing technology economy that I've been able to participate in. I'm a co-founder of Black Tech Columbus, which creates an authentic space for Black technology professionals to connect, collaborate, and create. And I have recently gotten involved in a couple of startups. One of them is Color Coded Labs, which maybe I'll talk about a little later, having to do with the skills gap and allowing people of color, people from disadvantaged and historically marginalized communities get access to the skills they need in order to participate in this job market. So I have a million things to say about it, but at the end of the day, we exist within kind of an information economy. And if you're not able to participate in that economy, then you're not going to get the results of other people. And everything else that we look at and say, let's give them this, or let's make sure that that can happen. People need full participation in an economy, which means they contribute and they get something out of that economy and they work within it. And we got a lot to talk about where that's concerned. We're just not making it happen. So thank you for having me, Tonjia. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. And so Doug is going to be leading our discussion in a few minutes as we start talking about some of the economic determinants. But before we do that, let's move on and meet our next friend, Ervan Rodgers. Where's my applause? Applause. Yes. Okay, great. Virtual applause. Ervan, hi. Yeah.
All right, there's my energy for being late and at 4 o'clock meeting. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Tonjia, for taking up this much needed discussion. This is something that, as a state of Ohio state CIO, that I look at from abroad, both from a rural, urban, multifaceted, different pieces and components. As the technology leader for the state, it's my responsibility to make sure that we're not only looking for today's needs, but we're also looking forward from a strategic standpoint. That includes not only providing connectivity, but it also is making sure that we have the appropriate programs in place in order to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. So thank you again for having me here. Thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So Ervan is going to be leading us through the discussion on infrastructure determinants. So we're really excited. And Ervan, you missed the intro. This is not a meeting. This is a talk show. Okay, so we just want to make sure that we are all aware and we understand that this is a talk show and that we're not going to call it a meeting even though it's on Zoom. Okay.
Awesome. So then my music to walk out on was appropriate.
Yes, you
Okay.
need the music.
Okay. All right.
Exactly. Now you're getting it. Okay.
Got it.
And finally, my tech brother friend, which I've newly met and so excited to get to work with every day. And Jermaine, you're right, I always have energy. Jermaine Henson, tell us a little bit about you and your interest in the divide and audience.
All right, Audie, awesome. Well, Tonjia always has energy, whether it's a meeting or a talk show. I'm glad that I now know that this is a talk show, so I'll try to raise my energy level up as well. But you know, I'm very, very excited to participate in this conversation. It is something that's near and dear to my heart. You know, I've been at Nationwide for several years, 20 plus years, done a variety of roles at Nationwide. But I like to always tell people about my humble beginnings and my humble roots of starting 20 plus years ago working at the help desk. And I had a very non-traditional path into technology. And part of the reason I had a somewhat non-traditional path is because of some of the lack of opportunity that I had as it relates to understanding and getting involved at an early age in the technology field. So, you know, so that's again why it's near and dear to my heart. Here at Nationwide, I lead a department called Software Development Services, Enterprise Technology Solutions. We focus on quality engineering. We also focus on our DevSecOps capabilities, so our secure software development pipeline. We also focus on our partnerships with our suppliers, so our supplier optimization. But the one area that I'm very involved and passionate about is building our diverse talent pipelines, highly skilled, highly diverse through both traditional and non-traditional pipelines with our colleges, but also with other non-traditional programs like Per Scholas. So I'm very excited to be here today, and I'll tell you, this is a talk show, and Ervan and Doug are both celebrities. I am just a rookie amongst the masses here.
No, you're not. You're a celebrity now, Jermaine. Welcome to the show. All right, let's jump right in. Remember, audience, please put your questions in the chat. There'll be a point where we'll stop and have you raise your hands, but as we're talking, just let us know what you're thinking. Doug, I'm gonna come to you first. Let's jump back in and talk about some of the economic determinants that you're seeing of the digital divide. So we already learned in the first 10 minutes that this isn't a problem we can throw technology at and simply say, give somebody a computer and the divide will be fixed.
Yeah, you know, we've all started talking about a few new words here. We used to talk about just internet access, but we've got a couple of different words here. Access, availability, and affordability have been talked about a lot more. And I'm going to let some of the other guests, you know, kind of talk about a couple of those things, and I won't beat it to death. But I think sometimes we've gotten to the point where we felt like there was not internet available in a particular community. And we have seen in parts of Columbus and where people have put internet, made it available places, and then found out that people either didn't know about it, didn't know how to access it, or could not afford to access it. And that comes down to some of the navigation needs that we have. I want to paint a picture for all of us as well, that some of us, particularly on this call, the kind of people who would join this call, use words like digital divide. And we believe that there is a divide and we understand it. But if you go into many of the communities we're targeting and ask them about digital divide, they wouldn't really say that. They wouldn't say, yes, I'm experiencing a digital divide. They would say, hey, I have what I have and I'm doing what I can do with what I have. I know what I know and I'm doing what I can. And so there's not necessarily an awareness that there is a better over on the other side of that line and I'm not getting it. And so I think we need to come to terms with that, because a lot of people use the internet, but use it according to what they need at that moment. So if you ask people, do you have access to the internet? And if they have a smartphone, they will say, yes, I do. But then if you ask them to do their homework on that smartphone, or to apply for a job or fill out their FAFSA form so they can go to college, they're not able to do many of those things. So we have to look again at what we mean when we use the big words and saying, we're going to give you access, you're going to get access to the internet, and you're going to participate. And then when on the ground and actually working on it, it just doesn't work that way. So, that's one of my big observations.
Yeah, and I think you make a wonderful point, Doug, when you're saying people utilize technology, but they don't know the next level of what they can be doing with it. And so although technology is an enabler, it can be a limiter as well if you don't have the correct access or connectivity.
That's right. And when it comes down to navigating with some of this stuff, my work and some of my thinking on it really has to do with navigation, because throwing all the resources in the world to someone who doesn't know how to use it or doesn't know how not to use it or not dealing with the information barriers that they have is not going to get the job done. I'll give you an example. A lot of people hear about privacy things like location settings, or that Facebook is using their data in a certain way, and they just shut down. And they say, well, I don't want Facebook to have my information, or I don't want people to track me. So they don't carry their phone, or they turn something off, or they do things that are not really going to be in their best interest. And they don't know how to use these tools to their advantage. And those are the kinds of things that in many marginalized communities have to be dealt with. We have to actually sit down and do that. And one of the reasons why I'm excited about conversations like these is, well, who's going to do that, right? If those of us who are not technology professionals and are extremely comfortable with this stuff are not going to sit down at the kitchen table, at the park bench, at the park picnic table with people and chat this stuff through regularly, frequently, and in a sustainable way, then we're not going to get to the other side of that. I want to point out 4 things that I'm focused on with another project of mine that is not ready for prime time yet, but I'm going to share the 4 areas of digital life skills that I feel are critical and are in our curriculum. One of them is internet access. Do you have access to the internet? One of them is devices. If you have access to the internet and you don't have a device, you don't have access to the internet. The third thing is security and data privacy. So if you're using the internet and you are not protected, you don't know how to protect yourself, then it's as if you're not using that resource at all. And then finally, having accounts and services. If you don't have an email account, then even though you might have a device and internet access, you can't use it to communicate, and you can't sign up for anything. And we're finding a lot of people who have access to the internet who don't really want to use an email account. And so as a result, they can't engage in all of the digital resources that are out there. This is a barrier of information. And so the first pillar that you're sort of putting in the ground here, Tonjia, in terms of economic, I'm going to put that flag in the ground and say, people can do what they need to do when they have the information. But you can't just drop a pamphlet off at people's door and say, okay, now here's the information. We got to work on this. We got to care about the people that we're dealing with so that they can get to where they need to get to as a community, right? We can't just airdrop pamphlets and say you have the information. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And that's why we're all here, because all of our audience members are kind of like our assemblage of the Avengers team, as Ervan likes to say. It's, we're hearing, okay, well, it's not enough to say, here's a computer, here's internet. How am I supposed to use this to further me, my family, my community? How do I use this to connect with careers and with jobs and with resources? These are things that are innate to us, obviously, because we're on a Zoom at 4 o'clock, but not to many, many people. So thank you so much, Doug, for that. Ervan, I'm coming to you next because Doug made such a, yes, thank you, Matt, with the applause. We were supposed to clap for Doug. Okay, great. Doug made such a great point about the connectivity piece. And yes, I can have a device, but if I don't have the right type of internet service or even internet access, that device is not useful to me. And Tony puts in the chat a concept called digital redlining. So I'd love to be able to hear kind of your thoughts on just any infrastructural barriers that are contributing to the divide and how we can potentially bridge them.
Yeah, so definitely happy to talk about that. But there's one point I want to kind of hit on I think that this pandemic has really highlighted the need even further than what we thought. We have folks that normally go to work 8 to 5 in a building. So yeah, they have access, right? They do their internet business, check their emails, do all that kind of stuff. But when they were sent home, we quickly realized that many employees, many students, many folks in different scenarios didn't have access. At the same breath, many of our systems couldn't take the pandemic volumes either. So there was lots of fine tuning through the course of this. I think what I call as an opportunity. You can look at it as a negative, but I always like to look at the glass half full. This is our opportunity because it really highlighted a lot of different areas. One of the initiatives, and I don't really want to talk about my day job the entire time, but one of the things that we're doing is through Broadband Ohio. And this is really taking a look at, if you go out to innovateohio.gov, you can take a look at, there's a map where, if I can share my screen, I can actually show you across the state. Let me see if I can share host disabled screen sharing. Okay, so
Matt will do it. Matt is our producer.
Okay.
Because we're fancy here on our talk show. We have producers.
Look at that. Here we go. So I'm going to share a map to give you a visual as to what I'm talking about. You can see across the state of Ohio, 25 megabits per second download and three up. That is bare minimum basic, which is considered the federal standard. If you go over and click on the link, you can go to 50, you can go to 100, and you can kind of start to see how the divide is shaping out with regards to what's the availability. So there's one thing to actually have the information available to you and to your fingertips, and then there is the ability to be able to afford it. And what we realized with regards to our students is that though they were home, one, they didn't have devices, two, they didn't have internet connectivity. So we put in $50 million of our CARES Act funding in order to put grants out there so that folks could take advantage of that to provide those hotspots to those particular homes so that students could do their homework. We also got creative and started to extend our network, our guest network, into parking lots where people could pull up and families could connect that way. It was a lot of hurry up and deliver multiple different angles in different ways, trying to get it out different fashions, because to Doug's point, not everybody sees the information the same way or has access to the information the same way. Sometimes it's a flyer, sometimes it's door to door, sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes it's mouth to mouth, sometimes it's trying to network in the middle of a pandemic. So I'd encourage you guys to go out, take a look at this this map. Hopefully you're seeing a map and not something else on my screen, but this is some of the work. It's actually riding on top of something I'm pretty proud of, and that's our Innovate Ohio platform, which is part of the Innovate Ohio brand. That's where all of our data collection for coronavirus.ohio.gov has been collected. We're able to provide that information data sets to those in the public that want to go out and download them with requests, not going to answer. So got to get approval, get it back. We'll deliver to you securely. So that's what I would like to kind of contribute from an overall infrastructure perspective, is to go out and take a look at some of the things and some of the tools that you may not be aware of that are available to your via your access.
So Ervan, thank you so much for that. Can you scroll back up? We were seeing the map, but now we're seeing like the bottom. Can you scroll back up to where we're seeing the map? I just want you to kind of click through the 25. So let's start with the 25. Wait, no, don't zoom back in on Ohio. Okay, there we go. Wait. Okay. Perfect. Where are we going? Okay. So I just want to go through the progression again. So 25 megs. Let's see what that looks like in terms of the saturation across the state. Okay. All right, everybody, take a look at that 50 and then 100. So, Mr. State CIO, can you give us an idea about 25 megs, like what can you do with that in terms of streaming and media, and what is the experience like with that?
In order to stream 4K video, you need at least 250 to upload or to download, and 50 to upload. If you're streaming video games, 4K definition, etc. So it kind of progressionally, goes down from there. Where you want to ultimately be and where you can comfortably do, homework would probably be around the 50 mark. 100 would be along the lines of if you have multiple families and members in your household, to be able to adequately have 10 plus devices attached to that.
So that right there, I just want the audience to kind of pause and noodle on, because when we're uncovering that the digital divide is not always about give somebody a computer. Okay, so looking at this map, and let's take a school age child or family with school age children. They're home. As we know, the pandemic had a lot of people doing remote learning. I don't think remote learning is going to go away at all, but we give them a computer and we're saying, connect to your teacher live on Zoom. I can't connect to my teacher live on Zoom because where I live doesn't have this capability for me. And maybe where I live, I can't just up and move because this is what my economic situation allows me to afford. So it's not as simple as saying, well, just go move somewhere where there's better internet. Well, I may not be able to afford moving my family to a place where there's better internet. So now, simply because of where I live and the devices that I may or may not have and the number of people that I may or may not have in my house, I, school child, am now potentially at a disadvantage of learning because I don't have the level of access that's needed. Sure. Doug, you had something to add?
One more thing before you go back to Doug. The other thing that we're talking about right now, but then where we're actually headed from a state perspective, we have a Marks radio system. It's a first responder radio network that covers the entire state of Ohio. So no matter where you're at, whether you're in the sticks, it doesn't matter. You'll get record response times. So we're going to try and leverage that state asset as a way to provide internet connectivity in the areas that you saw that there was no coverage. Additionally, there are technologies that we're partnering with SpaceX, where new age technology is coming out to be able to carry that signal. Microsoft has what they call white space in the TV signals that are being carried out. So there are some pretty innovative, creative things that are being tested right here in Ohio, primarily in the Cleveland area, both rural and urban area.
That's because our state CIO is great. See what happens when you have a great state CIO that understands, right?
No, I wouldn't take credit for all that. So I'm behind the green curtain supporting Lieutenant Governor John Husted and Governor Mike DeWine. So
well, we have a government that's looking at this and thinking about it, and that's important because they understand it. And that's what I mean why it's so important for us to really understand the underlying layers, because had they not understood, hey, there's an infrastructural component to this. We may have missed the mark on saying we need to ensure that there are acceptable speeds across the state to allow this connectivity and this accessibility. And it's not just teach somebody how to code and give them a computer. So Doug?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Tonjia, and by the way, Ervan is right to give credit to the amazing team that's working at the state. A lot of people have been working on this for a long time. But let's be real, his leadership is a part of that, his creativity. And I'm sorry, Ervan, you have to take that. You don't get to pass that off. You get some credit, and we appreciate the work you've done, and we can coordinate with you. But I wanted to mention something, Tonjia, that you had talked about streaming, for example, and there's a tendency to look at people who are on the wrong side of this digital divide and say, well, you don't have to have Netflix, you just sort of have to have the basics. Streaming means video communication. And you can't do that with 25 megs, not reliably. And that means your healthcare, and it means a whole bunch of stuff that just got shoved into there. And I heard a heartbreaking story as I was talking to somebody about how they use their technology. And one of the things he mentioned was his son is in jail, in prison. And one of the things, because of COVID and other things, there's no visitation right now. So let alone the fact that you're getting your court dates over video. If you want to do visitation with a family member, you've got to do it on Facebook, streaming, video live and Messenger. And so if you don't have that capability, that is impacting a family's ability to reach that stability. That means fathers cannot talk to their children. Now, many of us who are not in prison may look at that and say, well, hey, you're a prisoner. No, for these communities, the ability to have some semblance of family connection means a drop in recidivism. And it means that there are children and families and parents in the community who need to connect with these people. So we are hanging by a thread with family stability and those kinds of things. So we shouldn't look at streaming as a luxury that some people are just sort of enjoying and you could do without if you needed to. No, these are basic things of life, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Great point, Doug. Right now, connectivity is not just about how are you learning, how are you working. It's literally about how are you connecting and being productive in society. So as we have really accelerated, COVID has really accelerated our reliance on these technologies. Us addressing the digital divide is so much more important now because it's not just work and school. It's now work, school, and basic life. I need to talk to my family. And Doug, thank you so much for bringing that up. Okay, Jermaine, here I'm coming over your way to talk a little bit about some of the career and educational barriers, because building on top of these last two, Doug is speaking about some of the economic barriers and then weaving together with Ervan. And I love what Stephanie put in the chat. We were not even talk about the prices of these services. Well, that's another, that goes back to economics, right? So if I do have this service in my neighborhood, I might not be able to afford it. And now I'm not connected. So again, but I might have a computer. So just bringing home the fact of it's not give everybody a computer. I might have one, but I can't use it. Now, assume, Jermaine, that we have a computer. We have our connectivity, so we've solved for kind of variables 1 and 2 that Doug and Ervan were talking about. But what are some challenges that you're seeing educationally that may continue to have this family or community still divided as it comes to technology?
I think of a few things, and one of the things that I immediately comes to mind. One is we have to remove this stigma around technology. For those who are impacted as it relates to the digital divide. I mean, oftentimes people believe that to be a technologist means that you have to be a mathematician. It's this very complex profession, and I'm not saying that it isn't. But one of the things that I see as a major opportunity, especially at the younger ages, is helping kids understand how they can use technology to solve real world problems and not just be consumers of content, right? And so that's a really important thing. Being able to see how they can, one, understand, utilize, and apply technology in a meaningful way to solve problems that they may be facing is a mental model and a paradigm shift that we really have to work on with the kids, right? I mean, especially when you talk about from an education perspective. I think the other thing, that I think about is really helping people understand technology has such a broad application. It's such a broad profession, right? I mean, it is something that you think about from the context of data, information risk management, software engineering, full stack cloud engineers. There's so many different ways that technology can be applied. And the sooner you can get within that education life cycle, the sooner you can get people, both teachers and kids, involved in understanding how broad the profession is and how you can really understand, again, not just broad, but how you can apply technology to solve real world problems, that becomes, to me, a major enabler. That becomes it removes that stigma and allows people to see themselves in the profession. This is not a profession that's just for, historically, we've said that there's underrepresented people, whether it be rural, whether it be females, whether it be inner city African Americans. This is a profession for everyone. And I also even think about, you said, Tonjia, assume that people have access to a computer and high-speed connectivity and internet. There's so many free resources that people can leverage and use to upskill themselves. I have a senior in high school, and one of the assignments that I gave him to get him a little bit more hands-on with technology is that I want you to create a blog. I want you to set up an AWS account. I want you to go out and sign up for the light cell service. I want you to deploy a Unix server. I want you to set up a static IP address. And I want you to set up WordPress on the back end and create a blog. And he looked at me like I was crazy. But after about 4 or 5 weeks of applying that, he was actually able to figure it out. And then guess what? Guess how much my bill was for his AWS account for spinning up that Unix box and setting up that WordPress? $3.26. That's all it was. So, I'm old enough to remember when you didn't have elastic infrastructure in the cloud where you could spin up and really learn about system admin and network engineering and administration of a platform in the back end. We've got to get people. There's no reason why folks shouldn't be coming out of high school in some cases with AWS practitioner certificates, as well as A+ and N+ certificates. There's ways to really get them accelerators in technology. I'm sorry, you can see I'm pretty passionate about that. But there's so many resources available that we have to be able to use and apply. Now, you talked about what are some other things that are barriers. We also have to remember that you got to think about the educational programs that are in school. How do we make sure that the teachers are accounting for the fact that maybe not everyone has a dad that's in technology, or maybe not everyone has a background, right? How do we account for those things, right? How do we make sure that we are thinking about the resources and the assignments and being mindful of that? Expanding access at schools and thinking about that, working in the community. So Doug gave Ervan a compliment. I got to give Doug a compliment. It was probably a year ago, and I'm saying to myself, I've really had a great experience, and I've been tremendously blessed. And I feel like I'm at a point in my career I absolutely have to give back. So I started looking out around LinkedIn and figuring out who's demonstrating the behavior that I want to be like. And there was this young man, and he was all over LinkedIn. He was, I'm Black Tech 614. I'm working with high schools. I'm working with, I'm on the board here. So I reached out to him. I said, hey, can you please sit down and have lunch with me and explain to me how I can do some of the things that you're doing? And so I'm just starting my journey here, but I have to give Doug a lot of credit for getting me off the sidelines and getting me in the game and getting me involved in things like Per Scholars and TechCore, and even Tonjia, you for getting me involved, because it takes us being the change that we want to see and stepping up and taking the action. And sometimes we need people to nudge us a little bit and tell us what's possible. And I'm going to give Doug credit for doing that with me.
That's happening at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday. Thank you so much, Jermaine. I need to see my screen's not lighting up with applause and hearts. I mean, gosh, this was so great. All 3 rock stars just really pouring our hearts and souls into it because it's important. And as we see, it's so much deeper than technology. Jermaine is exposing his son and his example to all of the skills that could propel him forward. But everybody doesn't have a dad as awesome as Jermaine, who even understands what any of this is, or even knows that any of this exists. So that's why it takes us, all of us who are here, to say, okay, we're going to go out into our communities and we're going to go out to our families. Let's start at home first and make sure that the people who we can literally reach out and touch know the importance of being sure that everyone has access to knowledge about technology, and in addition to the technology itself, because it's not just about the technology. And I think that's where we were missing. the reason why I keep using that example, then I'm getting ready to go to the studio audience. So get your questions ready. I'm coming for the studio audience in a second. Is we knew that when the pandemic hit and all the schools went remote, the thing that stuck with me a lot was Columbus City schools. Everybody had to shut down. A lot of their students went unheard from. I don't remember what was the percentage. Doug or Ervan, do you remember what was the percentage of students?
No, I don't. It was too high. I remember that.
Yeah, it wasn't like one or two. It was a lot. And I'm thinking, and then that's when all the corporations were like, well, let's just sponsor all of the students to have a computer. But I'm thinking, but if we are they in a proper neighborhood where they're going to have the proper access that's going to allow them to be more than 25 or, whatever, actually have a full media rich experience? Okay, say yes, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but you have to consider that. Do they have the proper device? Or do they have enough devices in their household? Let's talk about that, right? It's not one-to-one. How many devices do you all have per person? Maybe 3 or 4 or 5, right? Okay, but is there even enough for all those children in the house? And even if there are their parents and family members and other support people well-versed enough in the technology to help them with their work once they have all of this stuff? And then we started uncovering the layers, because it's not good enough for a company X to say, we're going to give every student in Columbus City Schools a computer. And that's where I see a lot of the initiatives missing the mark. And I really wanted to have this conversation today. So again, thank you, Doug and Jermaine and Ervan, for sharing your thoughts. I see some questions coming up. Yes.
Hey, Tonjia,
all right. Go ahead while I'm looking through. Yeah.
I just want to add an update on that, because I think a lot of us had questions about, okay, so you're going to give a Chromebook and it's going home and we're going to put internet in the parking lot and we'll get there, right? But there are some updates there with the community, and our community truly has pulled together. Columbus City Schools, Columbus Public Library System, the City of Columbus, the State of Ohio through Broadband Ohio, MORPC. They started a call about every 2 weeks that has now resulted in the Franklin County Digital Equity Coalition, and has asked many of those questions. And I want to make sure we give credit where credit is due. There's an extraordinary amount of across the community has come together, leaders in many of these organizations, to quietly and without credit put resources on the table. The city of Columbus is leveraging its fiber network, and a lot of this is kept quiet because it's revolutionary and disruptive. But I want everyone on this call to be aware of that Digital Equity Coalition for Franklin County, and it is involved in experimenting with getting some internet there. So I don't think anybody thought that this was going to be a good long-term solution, and I think we all need to watch very carefully that it ultimately gets there. One last thing I want to throw in for everybody in the audience, that Tonjia is not talking about herself and chose not to, and good for you, Tonjia. Nice try there. But Tonjia was responsible for building a broadband network and a fiber network in the Virgin Islands. I believe it's the Virgin Islands. And she has experience with building infrastructure and that kind of thing. And she has done a huge amount of work with Central State University and advocating for HBCUs and those kinds of things. So Tonjia, you get some praise too. Thank you for all you do.
You guys, I'm just the host, okay? You all are the guests.
So I get to weigh in one little bit too. So with regards to what Tonjia's doing, we formed I'll never forget, I was on stage getting appointed. Governor's making the announcement. I deem Ervan Rodgers the state CIO. My pocket is just vibing. I mean, going crazy. I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I reach in real nice and gingerly, because it's going off. We're on commercial, and I text this person back and say, hey, I'll get with you soon, buddy. And that wasn't good enough. She says, I want your phone number. I want this. I want that. That was Tonjia. It was a real warm welcoming. So I made a trip to Central State University, and it was a great partnership. She enabled me to start my grassroots effort in other areas other than Central Ohio in order to hire talent from untapped markets. So we hired a gentleman by the name of Andre. I don't know if Andre Love is on here. I thought I saw him. He's going to attend, but we've been able to hire a number of folks through that. And so that's credit to Dr. Tonjia Coverdale. She hasn't forgotten where she came from, because she's taken that with her to nationwide. It's about the talent as well. So kudos to Dr. Coverdale.
Thank you so much. You guys got me over here blushing. I'm trying to focus on you, but no, I appreciate, and you all have been my partners in this. And that's why I chose you to come talk with me and help enlighten the community about our conversations that we have one-on-one and one-on-one, right? Let's give some insight, because we've had all these conversations behind the scenes, but it's just good to let people know what we're thinking and in terms of what can we really, really do. And I love what you brought up, Doug. I'm glad to know that there's been some progress made. We need to hear more about that. Like, we need to make these things known, because it's so important to be sure that we have equity. Like, as we go on in the months, we'll be talking about how this feeds into DE&I. For example, we hear from a lot of the companies, we don't have enough minority or underrepresented talent. We don't know where to find it, and well, where are you looking, right? So it's also that, but the flip side is, why aren't our children going into this field? Right. So maybe there is some sort of merit to, maybe we don't have enough to fill the pipeline, and we need to start talking about that in terms of digital divide. How can we get more children of underrepresented groups, women, girls, anything that's not the norm, to get into this field? That's a whole other section. I think we're going to do that next one. So if you're interested in that topic, please come back, because we'll be talking about that. Okay, let's see if you have any audience hands. Nobody has a question for our panel? No, you're not allowed to be quiet on my show. Okay.
Tonjia,
There's one. I have a hand. I'm excited. All right, running across to Yolanda.
Hi. I am a career educator, so I really like this conversation. I am not a digital native. I'm a baby boomer. Late baby boomer, but one of the things I see with a lot of things that's happened since I've been on the planet is that we create the sun and rocks and fire over and over again. So I'm interested in knowing how stakeholders on this Zoom or statewide, how are you collaborating across systems and across organizations so you're not recreating fire the first time? So often I see organizations, organization L will start something, organization P will start something, but they never talk to one another. And then the gap of service and resources becomes wider and wider and wider and wider. So that's my question. How are you collaborating so you can leverage the best of what you have, so you can close this gap?
Any
Can I
insights
jump in
into
there?
that? Yeah.
Yeah, Yolanda, what a great question, and a lot of good comments in the chat as well. We need to continue working on that. So I don't want to paint a picture that, hey, that's getting done. But I will tell you that this Franklin County Digital Equity Coalition has begun some of that. And I watch a lot of these things happen. I get involved in some of these conversations. And I can tell you that the corporate sector is involved. The local government, like the city of Columbus, and I'm there representing the city of Dublin, is in the room, is involved. The Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission is involved. Pat Lazinski is the CEO of the Columbus Public Library System. The CIO of Columbus City Schools is at the table. And they've now broken down so that it is that there are subgroups and working groups that are dealing with the digital navigation piece. And even though someone might have something that they want to do off to the side, you're in the room. You have to sort of report back, this is what is happening over here. And pulling in things, this is Central Ohio, from around the state. So on the Cleveland side, what are you guys doing up there? What's happening over here in Dayton? We need to benchmark on a nationwide kind of a thing. So that effort is being recognized and made, and it's a good point. But just because it's working, we still need to do that because, hey, somebody did this 3 years ago and we never took their study off the shelf. So let's dig back into it. But I am seeing signs of it, just so you know.
Thank you. Ervan?
Yeah, so one thing I would add to that, agree with everything that Doug has talked about. Through Innovate Ohio, there are a number of committees, subcommittees. You talk about the corporate layer. So a number of organizations, including nationwide, including a number of the large companies in the organization, and even some smaller ones that represent not only just Central Ohio, because a lot of times we just focus on Central Ohio, but we've got Dayton, we have Cleveland, we have Cincinnati, and some of the rural areas. I've partnered with OCEDA. OCEDA is a great organization. Doug will have to help me with the official definition of it, but basically it's where the cities and the counties come together. It's an association. It was one thing that I wanted to make sure that as we continue to partner together, that we were, getting the information out, that cities and counties could basically leverage a lot of the mass quantity deals that we were able to get with various discounts, et cetera. So those cooperative contracts are available from that particular perspective versus having to go out and redo that. They can take advantage of those things. From the universities, I'm tapping into the 14 state universities. I'm trying to tap outside of those into the private as well. So I'm really trying to stretch this to not only be state of Ohio state CIO, but be the state CIO for the entire community as much as I can. Before COVID, I was at every event. There was probably 2 or 3 events every night that I was hitting just to stay connected. I miss that element. So when you're thinking about your extroverted friends, send a prayer out for me. My wife isn't an introvert. She says she's been preparing for this moment all her life. So I'm struggling, and I think she's ready for me to go back to work and get a shot in the arm. So anyway, thanks.
I miss our selfies for sure. That was the signature thing.
Yeah, I totally missed that.
Any other hands or questions we have for our wonderful guests before we start wrapping up? Okay. Well, again, another heartfelt thank you to my friends, my brothers in tech, Ervan, Doug, and Jermaine, for shedding some words of wisdom. Yes, this is where all the boxes should have some claps in them because they are fantastic. We've got some of Ohio's, some of the country's greatest tech minds here. But what's more important is they really do care. Ervan just listed off of all these things that he won't take credit for, but he had to be somewhere whispering in the right ears to say, this is what we need infrastructurally. We've got Doug that's moving everybody, including Jermaine, who admitted it publicly, to action. And we've got Jermaine, who everybody's new breakout star. I think you're going to be hosting a show soon, Jermaine, for your passion, everything you're doing in Nationwide and across as a member of the board for TechCore, to say we need to do more about this K-12 pipeline across the country. And we need to get more people into our doors and understanding, even if they don't become technologists, the knowledge of what to do with technology is so important just to talk to your family. Right? Just basic life. So I want to thank all of you and thank you especially to our studio audience for our inaugural show. Yes, I'm clapping for you. Here's my audible clap. You made time to come and hang out with us for an hour. I can't believe it's gone by that quickly. And, we're engaged the whole time and just warmed my heart just to see that you care. That you care. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be here. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be engaged. And knowing that you care just makes me even more energized, if that was a thing. But you have really fueled me because now I know the army is growing. And I know we're going to go back to our homes and our families and our communities and say, listen, the next time we hear digital divide, we're going to understand that it's more than just a technology problem. It is a societal, It is a societal, a socioeconomic issue that we all must work together in a concerted effort to solve. And until we can understand the foundational determinants, then we will not be able to, we'll just be skimming the surface and we'll never get anywhere. So to fill the gap, we now have all of you who are armed, and I'm just so filled with eternal gratitude that you spent some time with us today. So hopefully you'll be back with us next episode. In episode 2, we're going to be digging deeper into the career and education determinants. Some of the guests on here on the call are going to be guests. So Tony Cunningham of Proscalis, we'll be hearing from her. We'll be hearing from Lisa Chambers from TechCore, and so many others, and people who have actually gone through these programs from our communities and how technology has changed their lives and transformed their lives. We're even going to have our producers come from behind the scenes. So I told them they can only be quiet this episode, but they are wonderful. So thank you to Matt and Stephanie. They are Tech Elevator alum, and I'm so happy that they joined to support us today and to make us a real talk show. I promise we're gonna have theme music next time. We had to see how the platform worked, but it's happening. I hope you join us again, and thank you so much for everything. Claps at the end of the talk show. So fun! Bye.
Nicely done.
It was great, Tonjia. Loved the energy.
Yeah, that felt pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah, good. Oh, it's just everybody was into it. The guests were into it. Like the chat was going. I was like, oh my gosh.
I know. I almost couldn't keep up.
I think we did good for our first show.
Yeah, that was a strong showing, and everyone that started in stayed in. So that's also a good confirmation of like how good the content is.
Oh, that was so good. Thank you so much for your support. I think everyone enjoyed it, and I'm just so glad. And I tried to stay humble, and of course, they're not. My tech brothers are not going to let me. Just be quiet. So I do have some music. I just have to get it cut to like the 8 seconds.
Okay.
And then I'll send it off to you. But I think we have like 3 weeks or something like that to figure it out. But I did get it, but I just didn't get it cut. So we'll play it at the beginning, and we'll play it again at the end. It's like 8 seconds. You know how they usually just sprinkle it in there. So
Okay.
Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.